June 6, 1944, 3 a.m. I put the binoculars to my eyes and looked out at the English Channel, and I stopped breathing. The horizon was gone. Where the darkness of the open water should have been, there was something else entirely. Ships. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, as far left as I could see, as far right as I could see, moving toward us through the darkness and the mist in complete silence from this distance. Just shapes. Just the largest thing I had ever seen in my life moving toward the coast of France. My hands were shaking when I picked up the telephone. I need to tell you what happened on that telephone call, because that call, what was said to me in the next 30 seconds, is the thing I have never been able to fully forgive. Not the war, not what came after, that telephone call. But before I tell you that, I need to tell you about a man named Karl Bremer, because Karl is the reason I am telling this story at all. And what happened to Karl, I will come back to that, but not yet. My name is Werner Hoffmann, Major, 1st Battalion, 352nd Artillery Regiment, German 352nd Infantry Division. Stationed in Normandy, France, spring 1944. I need you to understand what it was like to be in Normandy in those months before June, because the history books make it sound like we were waiting with complete knowledge of what was coming and when. That is not how it felt from inside it. From inside, it felt like waiting for something that kept not happening. We had been told the invasion was coming for months. We had drilled. We had reinforced the bunkers. We had laid wire and mines on the beaches below our positions. And then the weeks passed, and nothing came. And you start to wonder, maybe it won't. Maybe the intelligence was wrong. Maybe the Allies have changed their plans. Maybe this particular stretch of French coast was never what they wanted. That is a dangerous thought. I knew it was dangerous when I had it. I had it anyway. Karl Bremer was my orderly, 20 years old, from a small town in Bavaria, Wasserburg, on the Inn River. He was the kind of young man who had an opinion about everything and was usually right, and somehow never managed to be annoying about it. He made the best coffee I had in the entire war from whatever he could find and serve it like it was something to be proud of, which in 1944 in a bunker in Normandy it was. Karl had a younger sister named Elsa, who he talked about constantly. She was 14. He was going to take her to Munich when the war ended, show her the city. That was his plan. That was the whole plan. Get through this. Take Elsa to Munich. I tell you about Karl now because I need you to know who was standing beside me in that observation post at 3 a.m. on June 6, 1944, when I put the binoculars to my eyes and saw the end of everything. He saw it too. He was standing right beside me, and he saw it at the same moment I did. And he said, quietly, not dramatically, the way you say something when you're looking at something your brain has not finished processing. He said, Major. That is not nothing. No, that was not nothing. I picked up the telephone. I called division headquarters. The officer on duty picked up on the second ring. I told him what I was looking at. I told him the channel was filled with ships. I told him the invasion fleet was there, right now, moving toward us. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Hoffmann, it is 3 a.m. You are looking at fishing boats. I said, I am not looking at fishing boats. He said, get some sleep. We will talk in the morning. The line went dead. I stood in that observation post with the binoculars still in my hands and Carl standing beside me, and outside the window, the largest naval invasion in the history of human warfare moving toward the beach below us. And nobody believed me. I need to stop here and tell you something about that moment, because people ask me when I tell this story, they ask what I did next. And the answer sounds simple when you say it out loud. I picked up the telephone again. I called again. I kept calling until someone listened. But what that question misses is the 20 minutes between the first call and the second call. 20 minutes where I stood at that window with Carl and watched, and neither of us said anything. Because there was nothing to say. The ships were there. They were real. They were coming. And one phone call to one officer who did not believe me was not going to change any of that. What I remember from those 20 minutes, and this is the detail that has stayed with me for 80 years more clearly than the battle itself, is that Carl made coffee. We had a small stove in the corner of the observation post, and while I stood at the window watching the invasion fleet materialize out of the darkness, Carl quietly made coffee on that stove, as if having something warm to hold would help. As if the right response to watching history arrive was to make sure the Major had something in his hands. I drank that coffee. I have thought about that specific cup of coffee more times than I can count. At 0300 hours and 15 minutes, I called again. Different officer. I described what I was seeing in more detail. The scale of it, the number of ships, the direction of approach. This time there was a longer silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, "We are alerting the General." 20 minutes. That is what it took. 20 minutes and a second phone call. 20 minutes while the largest invasion fleet in history moved closer to the beach below my position. I have never stopped thinking about those 20 minutes. What might have been different? What might have been prepared? What might have been warned? Probably nothing. The honest answer is probably nothing would have been different. The scale of what was coming was beyond anything 20 minutes of preparation could have addressed. But I have still never stopped thinking about it. The bombardment started at 05:30. I have tried many times to describe what an Allied naval bombardment sounds like, and I have never found the right words. The word loud does not come close. The word overwhelming does not come close. It was total. It was the sound of something that had decided. There was no negotiating with that sound, no reasoning with it. It simply was, and you were inside it, and that was all there was. Carl and I were in the bunker by then. The observation post was not safe. The concrete around us was thick, but you could feel each impact as a pressure against the walls as much as a sound. Carl sat across from me in the corner with his back against the wall. He had his eyes closed. I thought he was praying. Later he told me he was thinking about Munich, about taking Elsa to Munich. I need to tell you what happened to Carl. I have been holding that back, and I cannot hold it back any longer. The bombardment ended at approximately 06:25. The beach below us was smoke and noise and chaos. Through the observation slit, we could see the first landing craft approaching, American troops, the big red one, the 1st Infantry Division, coming in through the smoke and the early morning light in small boats with men packed into them. What I saw through that observation slit is not something I will describe in detail. I will only say this. I had been a soldier for 4 years. I had seen combat on the Eastern Front before being transferred to France. I thought I understood what war looked like. I did not understand what that beach looked like in the first hour of June 6th, 1944. Our artillery was firing. Our machine gun positions were firing. The defences we had spent months building were doing exactly what they had been designed to do. And still, the Americans kept coming. Wave after wave of landing craft. More men than I had been told to expect. More equipment than I believed could have been assembled. By 0800, I understood that the beach was not going to hold. I did not say it out loud. You do not say certain things out loud in 1944, wearing a German uniform. But I understood it, and I believe the men around me understood it too. There is a silence that settles over soldiers when they know, not when they fear, but when they actually know. And that silence was in our bunker by 0800. It was Karl who said the thing nobody was saying. He said, "Major, should I begin preparing the withdrawal documentation?" He said it very quietly, very practically, not as an admission of defeat, as an administrative question, the way Karl always asked things, as if every situation had a correct procedure and his job was to find it. I said, "Yes, Karl, begin the documentation." That was the moment the battle ended for me. Not when the Americans reached the wire, not when the first strong point fell. When Karl asked his question and I answered it. We withdrew inland by 1400 hours. Our position was being flanked, and continuing to hold it served no military purpose. We destroyed what we could not carry. We moved east and then south. The sound of the battle behind us was different from the sound of the bombardment in the morning. The bombardment had been the sound of something beginning. What we heard as we walked away from the coast was the sound of something decided. I did not see Karl again after the withdrawal. We became separated in the confusion of the retreat. The roads were chaos, units moving in every direction, communication lines down, no clear chain of command. I assumed he had been attached to another unit. I assumed he had found his way to safety. I assumed I would find him when the situation stabilized. I have spent 80 years understanding that assumption was the last comfortable thought I allowed myself about Karl Bremer. In the winter of 1945, I received a notification. Karl had been killed in action. July 1944, 1 month after Normandy. Somewhere in the hedgerows of France that the Americans were fighting through village by village. He was 20 years old. He never took Elsa to Munich. I do not know if Elsa is still alive. She would be in her 90s now if she is. I have thought many times about trying to find her. I have never done it. Because what would I say? I knew your brother. He made excellent coffee. He kept his head when the world was ending. He asked the right question at the right moment in the right tone of voice. He was the best orderly I had in 6 years of war, and I let us become separated on a road in Normandy in the chaos of a retreat, and I never found him again. What would I say to Elsa? What I would say is this. The morning before the invasion, Karl stood beside me in an observation post in France and watched the entire Allied fleet emerge from the darkness. He saw what I saw. He said, "Major, that is not nothing." And then he made coffee, because that was what Karl did. He identified the situation accurately, and then he did the most useful thing available to him. I called headquarters. They told me I was looking at fishing boats. Carl made coffee. I have thought many times about which of us responded to that moment correctly. I think it was Carl. The invasion fleet was coming whether I called or not, whether anyone believed me or not, whether we had 20 minutes or 20 hours of warning. What Carl understood, what he had understood from the beginning in a way I never quite managed, was that some things are beyond the reach of a telephone call. Some things you cannot stop with the right information delivered to the right officer at the right time. Some things are simply coming. And when they come, the only question is what you do with your hands while you wait. Carl made coffee. I have never managed to do anything quite that sensible since.